Imagine being a happily married husband, fully trusting the woman you love, with never a reason to doubt her devotion. But what if, one day, a strange feeling overtakes you, and your perfect world starts to fall apart? One passing glance, one implausible story, and suddenly, you're spiraling into a nightmare of lies and betrayal. Are you prepared to see what it's like to uncover a monstrous truth hiding behind a flawless facade? This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a confession of shattered trust, consuming rage, and deep-seated pain. Discover what a person is capable of when love betrays them in the most treacherous way. My friend, and while you're watching this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put your gorgeous like. When I met Sophia for the first time, I thought I'd found someone with whom I could genuinely share my life. Our relationship moved at a breakneck pace, filled with passion, excitement, and intense emotions. She was everything I thought I wanted: clever, funny, able to make me laugh even during the most stressful times at work. For years, I was convinced we shared something extraordinary, something unbreakable. But as time went on, small cracks began to appear, things I brushed off as normal in any long-term relationship. Gradually, those cracks widened. I started noticing subtle changes in Sophia. She became more guarded, often answering my questions evasively. Her business trips grew longer, and her time away became harder to ignore. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking because of the distance, but every now and then, I'd catch a fleeting moment that made me feel like something was terribly wrong. Everything started to unravel one night in Oklahoma City, a night I can never forget. I was at a bar with my friend Toby, celebrating a big deal we'd just closed for our respective companies. We had just concluded negotiations, and the mood was light, full of accomplishment. As I took a sip from my glass, a ruckus from the other side of the bar caught our attention. Toby turned to me asking, "What's happening over there?" I shrugged. Not sure. We both looked over and saw a young blonde woman at a booth, surrounded by a group of large men. She was clearly tipsy, laughing uproariously at something one of them had said. Her outfit, a short skirt and a loose sleeveless top, caught our attention, but it was her long blonde hair and the rose tattoo on her shoulder that struck me. For a second, I thought she looked just like my wife, Sophia, but that was impossible. Sophia was away on one of her regular business trips. This time, she was in Houston for a 4-day stint, working on a factory deal. Sophia worked for a company that sold security systems to factories nationwide, which meant she was often traveling. Her trips typically lasted 3 to 5 days, and this time I had planned to meet up with Toby in Oklahoma City while she was away. It was an ideal chance to catch up without disrupting my family life. As we watched, the woman stood, and her entire group exited the bar, walking past us. She was holding hands with 2 men, one black, the other Hispanic. As they walked by, she glanced directly at me, and I noticed her striking dark blue eyes. The group laughed together as they headed for the door. "Are you all right, David?" Toby asked after they'd left. "Oh, I should probably mention, I'm David Miller, head of product development at Riker Industries in Denver, Colorado. My goal on this trip was to finalize a deal with Toby's company to manufacture a new line of energy-efficient air conditioning controls for smart homes. With sustainability and environmental impact being such major concerns, this partnership would benefit both our companies. Tonight's celebration was in recognition of our hard work paying off. "Yeah," I replied to Toby. "It's just that woman reminded me so much of my wife, Sophia." "But isn't she supposed to be in Houston?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "but something about that blonde woman unsettled me. I can't really put it into words." Just then, our waitress approached to take our next order. We asked for 2 more beers, and as she was about to leave, I stopped her. "Hey, can you tell me anything about that blonde who just left?" She looked at me a little amused. "Oh, her? I see her here all the time. She usually has a group of guys with her. You're not planning on meeting her, are you?" she added with a smirk. "No, just curious," I said. We finished our drinks and decided to call it a night. I promised Toby we'd stay in touch, and then I headed to my hotel room. Once there, I tried calling Sophia, but her phone went straight to voicemail. That struck me as strange since she always kept her phone on her. I even tried calling her hotel in Houston, only to learn she'd checked out earlier that morning. It wasn't unusual for Sophia to handle multiple clients on a single trip, but she usually let me know if her schedule changed. I decided to send her a quick text. "How's it going?" I typed. She replied almost immediately. "All good, just exhausted." "Long day?" I asked. Preparing for bed, I sent a message. "Where are you?" She replied quickly, "At the hotel. Where else?" Her response surprised me. "Really?" I asked, feeling a hint of doubt. "Where else would I be?" she echoed. Dada was never one to lie, but something didn't sit right with me. She added, "I'll be home Friday evening as planned. Love you," she wrote in another message. Reading her words, I sensed she wanted distance, a quiet evening without interruptions. I replied, "Love you more." But the whole exchange left me unsettled. The next day, I returned home, still mulling over our conversation. If Sophia wasn't at her hotel, where had she been? Was she even in Houston? I decided to ask her when she got back. Friday came around quickly, and Sophia arrived right on time, even beating me home. Her car was already parked in the garage. As I walked upstairs, I heard the shower running. I undressed, hoping to surprise her by joining her, but when I opened the door, she screamed. Surprised, I tried to embrace her, but she backed away. "What's going on?" I asked, bewildered. "I haven't seen you in days, and you're acting like I'm some stranger." "You scared me to death," she said, regaining her breath. "Just let me finish my shower, all right? I'll be out in a few minutes." I shrugged, accepting her mood. "Sure," I said, feeling a bit deflated. "I missed you, that's all." I left the bathroom, dressed, and headed downstairs to relax with a beer and the evening news. About half an hour later, she came down, now in shorts and a t-shirt. "I'm sorry I snapped at you," she said, her voice softening. "I missed you too. The trip was exhausting." "I tried calling you Wednesday," I said, testing the waters. "Where were you?" "At the hotel," she answered calmly. "Really?" I pressed. "Because when I called, they said you'd checked out that morning." She sighed. "Oh, right. There was a leak in my bathroom. The floor was soaked and they didn't have another room. I had to switch hotels. I meant to tell you." I exhaled, feeling some relief but still wary. "I was worried," I admitted. "I even had good news to share." "Oh?" Her curiosity seemed genuine. "You remember the company in Oklahoma City? I went out there while you were in Houston, met with their financial director, and closed the deal. If all goes well, I'll get a significant commission." I smiled, thinking of our future. "Maybe we can start thinking about having kids." She froze. "Wait, you were in Oklahoma City 2 days ago?" she asked, her tone suddenly off-kilter. "Yes," I said, watching her closely. "Why does that matter?" "It's just, you didn't mention you were going," she replied, visibly uneasy. "It was a last-minute decision," I explained. "Toby was available, so I flew out to meet him, spent the night, then came home. I thought you were in Houston, so I didn't think you'd notice. I even tried calling, but couldn't reach you. The hotel told me you checked out." She looked away, fidgeting. "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I didn't want to bother you with it." "It wouldn't have been a problem," I replied, wanting her to know she could trust me. After a moment, she added, "I have news too. My territory's expanding. I'm taking over for a rep who's leaving, which means I'll be traveling even more, probably 4 or 5 days a week." 4 or 5 days every week? I echoed, absorbing this new reality. I stared at her, stunned. "I barely get to see you as it is. How long will this last?" She shrugged, uncertain. "Could be a few months, until they find a replacement, at least. So it might be over in 3 months or so?" I muttered, trying to keep my frustration down. "When does this even start?" "Monday," she replied, glancing at her phone. I fly out to Miami first thing Monday morning. When did you get the news? Last night after I checked in with the office, she said, not looking at me. Unbelievable, I whispered under my breath. We spent the evening quietly, had dinner, watched a bit of TV, and then headed to bed. We made love, trying to savor these last moments together. Saturday we went out dancing, ending the night with another round of passion. Sunday was slow and lazy. We slept in, lingering in bed for most of the morning. By around 1, she started getting ready, and I got up too, heading outside to tackle the weekend yard work. That night, we ordered pizza, and before long, we were in bed again, making the most of our final hours. On Monday morning, as she was about to leave for the airport, she leaned in, ran her hand down the front of my pants, and said, "Keep this nice and warm for me." "You know I will," I replied, planting a quick kiss before heading off to work. Every evening that week, she'd call to say she was safe, keeping me updated. When she returned, we spent the weekend wrapped up in each other, filled with passion. This rhythm of quick goodbyes and intense reunions lasted about a month, and then everything changed. It was a Monday morning, and I had just drained my first cup of coffee in the office. Sophia had flown to New York on Sunday and mentioned she'd arrive early Monday. She warned it could be a longer trip, maybe 5 days, maybe more. I didn't love the idea, but she reassured me that it was for the best and could bring good things for us both. After my second coffee, I was back at my desk when an intense, searing pain hit me. It felt like fire spreading inside. Memories of stories I'd heard from the guys during my time in the service flashed through my mind. Dread crept in. Could Sophia have brought something back with her? I hurriedly told my assistant I needed a doctor, and rushed out. Doc Brown had been my go-to ever since I left the Army, someone I could trust to get to the bottom of things quickly. He ran a series of tests, took samples, and finally came back with the news. "I'm sorry, David, you have gonorrhea," he said, his voice sympathetic as he handed me a prescription for antibiotics. "This shot and these pills should clear it up. But I need to ask, how many partners have you had recently?" "Just one." "For the last 7 years, it's only been Sophia," I said, my voice flat. "We've been married for 6 years, but I was exclusive with her for a full year before that." Doc nodded, though his eyes held sympathy. "I understand," he replied gently, "but she'll need to see a doctor as well. I'm also recommending you avoid any intimate contact for the next 2 weeks." "Fine," I said, not even looking at the sheet of instructions he handed me. I knew one thing for sure. There was no way I'd be touching Sophia anytime soon. After the exam, I settled my bill and headed to my car, my mind racing. Sitting behind the wheel, I called my boss and gave him a quick rundown. He was understanding, having gone through a rough divorce himself. "Take a few days to get this sorted out," he said. I needed answers about what Sophia had been doing and with whom. After a bit of digging, I found a private investigator named Hammer Investigations and made the call. "How can I help you?" came a friendly voice on the other end of the line. I introduced myself and explained that I wanted to meet in person. "Of course," she replied smoothly. "You can come in right away." When I arrived, the receptionist greeted me warmly, saying, "Mr. Hammer will be with you shortly." I couldn't help noticing her long hair and the confidence in her stride as she led me down the hallway to his office. Inside, a tall, solidly built man stood up to shake my hand. "James Hammer," he introduced himself, gesturing to a chair. "Please have a seat. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea?" "No, thank you," I replied as the secretary left the room. James turned his attention to me. "So, Mr. Miller, what brings you here today?" he asked. As I explained my situation, James listened intently, jotting down notes as I spoke. "Have you consulted a lawyer about this yet?" he inquired. "Not yet," I admitted. He nodded thoughtfully. "We work closely with a few reputable lawyers in the area. I'd be happy to recommend one if you'd like." "I'd appreciate that, thank you," I replied. You mentioned your wife is in New York? He asked, and I nodded. Do you know if she has plans to travel anywhere else this week? He continued. I'm not sure, I said. She didn't mention anything. He offered, I could call her office to check. Go ahead, I said, pulling out my phone. I dialed her office number. After a few rings, her secretary, Janice Billings, picked up. I asked to speak with my wife's assistant, Patricia Holder. Moments later, Patricia's voice came on the line. Hi, Pat. It's David Miller. I was hoping you could help me with my wife's schedule. She usually shares it with me, but I seem to have misplaced my copy. There was a pause before Patricia responded. Mr. Miller, your wife doesn't work here anymore. Didn't she inform you? Tell me what? I asked, bewildered. She resigned about a month ago, Patricia replied. I thought she would have told you. She never mentioned it, I said, trying to process the revelation. Did she tell you why she left? Patricia hesitated. She said something about finding a better opportunity, a job that pays more and aligns with what she loves doing. Did she tell you where she was going? I asked. No, she didn't provide any details, Patricia said. I'm sorry, but that's all I know. Thank you anyway, Patricia, I said, ending the call. I relayed everything to James, who nodded thoughtfully. That's unusual, he murmured. Then, a realization struck me. A few months earlier, I'd installed a tracking app on Sophia's phone after she lost it on a trip. The hotel staff had returned it to her, but I'd added the app just in case it happened again. I opened it now and waited as it loaded her current location. The app showed that her phone was at the Courtyard New York Manhattan Hotel, though she'd told me she was staying at the Times Square Hotel. Why was she at a different location? I showed James the location on the screen, and he took note. Then a memory surfaced. The night I'd seen her with Toby. Is it possible she's disguising herself? I asked. Could your team still track her? We have ways of dealing with that, he assured me. Do you think she could have changed her appearance? I told him about the woman I'd seen with Toby that night. He considered my story carefully. This doesn't seem like a typical affair. It seems she's hiding something much deeper, Mr. Miller, he said. And she's gone to great lengths to keep it from you. I have contacts in New York and other cities who can help, but this will come with additional costs. I need to know what's going on, I said. Bring them in. I sent James a few recent photos of Sophia. After acknowledging he'd received them, he handed me some paperwork to complete. I'll start on this right away, he assured me. My team in New York will keep an eye on her. It may take a few days, but we'll uncover the truth. Once I have a report ready, I'll reach out, he told me, passing along a business card for Robin Hawkins, an attorney. She's the best in the business, James assured me. People go out of their way to avoid her. I nodded, catching his drift. I'll give her a call, I replied, slipping the card into my pocket. Our meeting wrapped up shortly after. We shook hands and I left a substantial deposit with the receptionist as I handed over the necessary paperwork. On my way out, I glanced at Robin's card and dialed her number. Though she wasn't available at that moment, I secured an appointment for 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Perfect. I headed home, my thoughts already racing. For a moment, I thought about reaching out to Sophia, maybe a quick call or text, but I held back. She usually called me after work, and I figured it was best to keep up appearances for now. But with suspicions gnawing at me, I decided to check her paperwork, which she kept locked in her desk drawer. I had a key, just as she had one to mine. In the past, I wouldn't have dreamed of invading her privacy. That was before the lies, before the trust had shattered. Unlocking the drawer, I found a thick stack of bank statements from a different bank than the one we used together. It dawned on me that she'd had a separate account when we first got married. I'd assumed she'd closed it when we opened a joint one. Apparently, I was wrong. The latest statement, dated 3 weeks prior, showed a balance exceeding $500,000. What the hell? I muttered, examining the transactions. Among them were significant deposits from a business called Forge Enterprises. I'd never heard of it, so I made a mental note to investigate. Then, there were withdrawals, high-end clothes, jewelry, wigs, hotels, flights, expenses she'd never mentioned. One ticket stood out. A round trip from Houston to Oklahoma City, bought just days before my meeting with Toby. Could Sophia have been the woman I'd seen at the bar, disguised? I kept digging and unearthed records of payments to Planned Parenthood clinics. The earliest was dated roughly a year into our marriage, with 2 more following at intervals. Questions piled up in my mind, but I pressed on, determined to learn the truth. I found yet another folder, this one filled with receipts and documents from various medical offices. The top document was from a recent visit to a doctor just before her latest trip, showing that she'd been treated for gonorrhea. Beneath that were 3 receipts from different clinics, all for D&C procedures. The meaning was painfully clear. Since our marriage, Sophia had gone through at least 3 terminations, without a word to me. I hadn't even known she'd been pregnant. The realization felt like a punch to the gut, but there was more. Tucked in the back, I found a folder of tax forms. About 3 years ago, Sophia had convinced me to file our taxes separately, citing concerns about a higher tax bracket due to her bonuses. After some debate, I'd agreed. Now I could see the real reason for her insistence. Her tax returns showed far more income than she had let on, with additional payments from Forge Enterprises. The most recent one was substantial. Why was she getting these payments? The answer lay in another folder. Inside, I found a contract and signed consent forms between Sophia and Forge Enterprises. Although the legal jargon was dense, the essence was unmistakable. She had signed up to appear in at least 5 full-length adult films every year for 5 years. The contract, notarized and dated over 3 years ago, bore Sophia's signature alongside that of Harold Forge, president and CEO of Forge Enterprises. Stunned, I took the folders to the copier, making duplicates of everything and setting aside a folder for the lawyer. I also scanned the most damning documents, saving them onto a flash drive to email James. Once I'd returned everything to its place, locked the drawer and closed it, I realized I had gathered more than enough evidence, but I still lacked context. Had she been unfaithful throughout our entire marriage? And what about all the additional money? Without access to her emails or messages, I was still in the dark on many fronts. I emailed the files to James and followed up with a call to confirm. "Thanks, David," he murmured, tucking away the information to further his investigation. Afterward, he climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. They each had their own dressing rooms, and he had always respected her privacy by staying out of hers. This time, however, he broke that unspoken boundary and ventured into her closet. Inside, he discovered bags stuffed with skimpy dresses and outfits more suited to a nightlife scene than any other occasion. He also found a couple of wigs. One, in particular, closely resembled the one he'd noticed on the woman in Oklahoma City. Stacked against the wall was a small plastic drawer unit, which he opened to rummage through. Inside, he uncovered a collection of small boxes. Curious, he opened one and found contact lenses. Sophia had never worn glasses, nor had he ever seen her use contacts, especially not prescription ones. These were purely cosmetic, intended to change her eye color. As he searched further, he stumbled upon a pamphlet displaying temporary tattoos. One of the designs was a rose that matched the tattoo he'd seen on the woman in Oklahoma. A cold realization washed over him. How much deception was Sophia willing to weave? Who was the woman he thought he knew so well? Pressing on, he came across a box in a corner containing various adult toys. Once he had suggested to Sophia that he'd like to see her use items like these, but she'd dismissed the idea, calling it perverse. At the bottom of the box, however, was a DVD encased in plastic. Its label, scrawled in black marker, read, "DD and the Boys Volume 1, Raw Footage." He muttered in disbelief, "What on earth?" With trembling hands, he went downstairs, slipped the DVD into the player, and turned on the TV. The screen displayed a dimly lit room with a narrow, upholstered bench in focus. A date stamp in the corner indicated the footage was from roughly 3 years ago. Intrigued and horrified, he continued watching as the bench brightened, revealing Sophia, dressed in a short sundress and a long red wig, a feeble disguise. In the background, a rough male voice spoke up. "Right on time? Good. Now take off your clothes." Sophia, almost inaudibly, replied, "Yes, sir," nodding submissively. She unbuttoned the dress, slipped the straps from her shoulders, and let it fall to the floor, revealing she wore nothing underneath. A large man, clad only in a towel, approached her, scrutinizing her as if she were an object. His gaze fell on her left hand. "Married, huh?" he muttered, lifting her hand to display the rings, the same rings her husband had placed on her fingers. "Yes, sir," she replied. "And does your husband know what you're doing?" he pressed. "He knows," she said almost mechanically. "Does he approve?" the man continued. Sophia nodded. "Yes, sir. He's fine with it. He knows he could never satisfy me, so he told me I should find someone else to meet my needs." He screamed at the TV. "I never said that!" The realization dawned on him that this was all a rehearsed lie, likely part of a script. The video continued, showing graphic scenes with Sophia and several men, none of whom bothered with protection. It now made sense why she had contracted gonorrhea. Who knew what else she might have been exposed to? Shock didn't cover it. He was utterly shattered. Grief turned to rage, a simmering fury at her betrayal. Love was gone, obliterated by hate and contempt. All he wanted now was for her to vanish from his life completely. He needed her gone, forever. I needed a change of scenery, so I tidied myself up and headed over to Hitchhikers, a cozy bar and grill I often visited. Typically, I'd order a beer and a burger and sit there, mulling over the fragments of my marriage, wondering where it had all fallen apart. I kept replaying every moment, trying to understand what might have pushed Sophia to act as she did. I had always treated her with respect, showering her with love from the very beginning. I'd buy her flowers or thoughtful cards, little reminders of how much she meant to me. I thought we had a good life, a contented life together. I was happy, and she seemed happy too. Infidelity was never even a thought. I'd never hurt her that way. So why was she doing this? I couldn't make sense of it. I finished my burger, checked the time, 4 p.m., and suddenly, I had an idea. I picked up my phone and called Robin Hawkins's office. With everything I'd uncovered, I knew that starting the divorce process was the only way I'd find any peace. The receptionist answered, and I made my request. "Let me take a look, Mr. Miller," she said after a brief pause. "We actually just had a cancellation, so Miss Hawkins could meet with you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Does that work?" "Perfect," I replied, feeling a small sense of relief. "Great. I'll set you up with the appointment, and she'll see you first thing," she confirmed. I thanked her, and after I hung up, my phone rang almost immediately. It was Sophia. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I picked up. "Yes?" I answered, my voice blunt. "David, it's me, Sophia." She sounded surprised. "Are you all right?" "Not really, Sophia," I replied. "It's been a rough day. What about you? Isn't it early for you to be calling?" She laughed a little. "Not too early. I'm in New York, remember?" "Right. I just wanted to check in," she said. "I'll be out with clients tonight, so I'll be busy. Just wanted you to know." "Thanks for the update," I responded coolly. "How's everything on your end?" "Pretty good, actually. This deal is shaping up to be great for the company." "That's good to hear," I replied. There was a pause. "David, are you sure you're okay?" she asked, sounding genuinely concerned. "You don't sound like yourself," I hesitated. "Just not feeling great," I told her. "Is there anything I can do?" she offered. "No, I'll probably just turn in early. If I'm still feeling off tomorrow, maybe I'll see a doctor." "Well, take care of yourself," she said softly. "I want you in perfect health when I get back. I miss you, you know." "Yes," I replied. "I love you," she added, her tone signaling the end of the conversation. Me too, I muttered before hanging up. I wondered if she'd noticed I hadn't returned her "I love you," but realized I no longer cared whether she loved me or not. I finished my meal, headed home, and lay on the couch, mindlessly watching TV until sleep finally took over. The next morning, I woke up early, brewed some coffee, showered, got dressed, and gathered everything I needed for my meeting with Robin Hawkins. Arriving a bit before 8, I was shown straight into her office, where Robin greeted me with a firm handshake. She looked around my age, with dark, wavy hair that framed her face. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she said with a warm, professional smile. "How can I help you today?" I laid everything out for her, setting a thick folder of evidence on her desk. She flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents, taking in the details of everything I had uncovered. After finishing her review, she placed the folder on the table and looked straight at me. "I assume you've already spoken with Mr. Hammer?" she asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "I shared some of this information with him as well. He mentioned he has contacts in New York who are watching her closely." "All right," she nodded. "So, what's your end goal here?" "I want her completely out of my life," I said firmly. "I want to keep the house, my pension, my income, everything. From what I understand, she's entitled to half of our $1 million pension account and any personal assets. But I don't want to give her a cent in support." Looking over the financials, she replied, "It appears she's earned substantially more than you. I doubt you'll need to pay any spousal support. However, the court may still require you to sell the house and split the proceeds, along with a portion of your joint assets. But I'll work to limit that. Fortunately, our state allows you to file on grounds of infidelity, and judges here tend to consider that in property division." She continued, "I'll coordinate with James, see what else he has on her, and we'll move forward once she returns Sunday afternoon." "I've already informed her," I said. "Good. That gives me enough time to prepare everything and file the suit," she responded, handing me her business card with her personal cell number scribbled on the back. She also passed me a sheet of instructions. "If anything new comes up, don't hesitate to reach out, but don't act impulsively. I'll call you as soon as the documents are ready to file." "Thank you," I replied. She gave a small smile, stood up, and we shook hands, marking the end of our meeting. On my way out, I stopped by the receptionist's desk to leave the advance payment. The following 2 days passed without incident. My routine remained the same: wake up, go to work, return home, eat, and sleep. My boss had offered me some time off, but I was too restless to stay idle at home. On Thursday afternoon, Robin called and asked if I could meet her and James at her office the next morning. I agreed and arranged to take Friday off from work. That evening, Sophia called me. "I just wanted to let you know everything's going smoothly and I'll be back Sunday afternoon," she said. "Good to hear," I replied. "What time do you expect to be home?" I asked. "I'll take a taxi from the airport, so I should be home around 1, she told me. "Then we can celebrate. How does that sound?" she teased. "Sounds great," I replied. "All right, sweetheart," she continued. "See you then. Hope you've been taking your vitamins because I plan to wear you out." I laughed. "Sounds enticing," I said. "See you then." After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, a small grin forming. Yeah, someone's about to be in for a surprise, I thought. The next morning, I arrived at Robin's office a few minutes early. I was promptly shown into a conference room where I shook hands with James and Robin. She introduced me to 2 imposing men in dark suits. "David, this is Agent Smith, and this is Special Agent Jones," Robin said. "They're both with the FBI." I blinked in surprise. "The FBI? Why is the FBI involved?" "We'll get to that," Robin assured me. "Let's sit down and discuss everything." We all took our seats, and Robin pulled out the divorce papers. "They were filed with the court yesterday afternoon," she explained. "Everything is set up just as you requested. And you said she'd be home tomorrow at 1 o'clock, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Yes, that's accurate," I confirmed. "Good," she replied. passing the documents over to James. James will deliver these to her. He's also a notary, so he can verify her signature if she decides to sign. I have a feeling she'll realize the gravity of her situation and comply. James opened his briefcase, carefully tucked the documents inside, then produced a thick folder and a stack of DVDs, setting them on the table. I looked at the pile, puzzled. "What's all this?" I asked. "My final report," James replied, handing me a photo of a disheveled man with slicked-back hair. "Who's this?" "Harold Forge," James said with a wry smile. "And your instincts are spot on. He's more than just a sleazy guy." He explained that Forge ran a national chain of strip clubs headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, and was deeply embedded in the adult film industry. "What does any of this have to do with my wife?" I asked, feeling impatience creep in. James looked at me steadily. "Your wife has been working with him for years." He revealed that she was involved in Forge's organization, which focused on group events and adult entertainment. She had even appeared in several of his productions and was actively recruiting others. I stared at James, speechless, as his words sank in. How did she manage all this on her business trips? I eventually managed to ask. She'd shave a couple of days off her trips, James explained. She'd go to Forge's events, spend a day or two cleaning up afterward, and return home as if everything was normal. She counted on the fact that you wouldn't suspect a thing. "That lying manipulator," I muttered under my breath. James continued, his tone calm. "She went to extraordinary lengths to keep this hidden. Disguises, wigs, colored contacts. She knew you respected her privacy enough not to search her belongings, which made it easier for her to keep it secret all these years." I thought back to the wigs and colored lenses I'd occasionally noticed in her closet and drawers. James wasn't finished. "About 3 years ago, Forge decided to profit more by recording these events. Your wife agreed to appear in 5 films per year under contract. She's already made 15, he said, gesturing toward the DVDs on the table. These are some of the recordings. Forge uploaded previews online and they've racked up hundreds of thousands of views." I felt a wave of shock, but James continued. "Last month, Forge officially hired your wife. Alongside her performances, she's been recruiting and training others. She's gained quite a reputation in that circle." I sat there, numb, as I tried to process everything. "So, where does the FBI come into this?" I finally asked. Special Agent Jones spoke up for the first time. "Remember the Zex cult case from a few years back? The one involving the local actress?" I nodded. "Yes, the leader ended up with a massive prison sentence." "Exactly. 120 years, Jones confirmed. "We suspect something similar is happening with Forge. Our investigation is uncovering a broader network, and your wife is a part of it. When she returns, we'll need to take her into custody, and your cooperation would be invaluable," he said, studying my reaction. I nodded, still reeling. "Of course," I replied, dazed. "I'll do whatever I can." We spent the next hour going over the details. Smith and Jones outlined my role, and I agreed to each part of the plan. Sunday arrived. Just after 1 p.m., Sophia came through the door, bags in hand. She gave me a warm smile, but it vanished the instant she noticed everything spread out on the kitchen table. "Sit down, Sophia," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." "I need to clean up and shower first," she murmured, casting a glance at her suitcase. "It can wait," I replied, keeping my tone firm. "No, Sophia, we need to talk now." She hesitated but eventually crossed the room, sitting down in front of the stack of evidence I had collected. What? What does all this mean?" she stammered, her voice unsteady. I ignored her question and instead pressed on. "Tell me, Sophia, it was you in Oklahoma City, wasn't it? The time you claimed you were in Houston?" Her face transformed, the shock morphing into something colder, and for a moment, I barely recognized the woman in front of me. "Yes, it was me," she admitted, strangely composed. "I was surprised to see you there, almost thought you'd step in. Good thing you didn't. Those guys would have left you in pieces. How did I know? Changing clothes and wearing wigs won't work on me. I'd recognize your face anywhere, I replied. She simply shrugged, then met my gaze with unsettling calm. Were you ever planning on telling me about the pregnancies? I asked, my voice wavering. 4, actually, she replied, her tone icy. The first one was before we even got married. I felt bile rise in my throat. Were any of them mine? I managed to say, feeling my stomach turn. She answered with chilling indifference. Maybe, maybe not. I've been with a lot of men, different races too. I wasn't about to risk having a biracial child with you. Besides, I never wanted the responsibility of a kid. It was my choice. Yes, your choice, I replied, struggling to steady myself. And now it's my choice to never touch you again. How long has this been going on, Sophia? I know it's been years. This started before we were even engaged, she said flatly. At first it was every few months. Then it became a monthly thing. Eventually it happened whenever I traveled. At first I arranged it myself, but once I met Harry Forge, things shifted. Why? I asked, desperate for a reason that made sense. Simple, she replied, unfeeling. I have a high sex drive. I enjoy when multiple men have me at once. You're an incredible husband and lover, don't get me wrong, but you make love to me. They just use me. This was never about you, and it didn't change how I felt. I love you. I always have. You're delusional, I snapped, anger boiling inside me. Do you realize how much you hurt me? You gave me gonorrhea, for God's sake. Did you even tell them you were with me, or was that just another lie? For the first time, she lowered her gaze. I'm sorry, she murmured. No, I didn't include you. Perfect, I said bitterly. No wonder I didn't get any warning. We argued bitterly, each word cutting deeper than the last. I could feel myself reaching the end of my patience. Finally, I looked toward the front of the house and shouted, "All right, you can come in now." At that moment, the door to my office opened, and 5 people entered. Sophia looked up, startled, as James approached her, holding a manila envelope. Sophia Miller, he said firmly, handing her the envelope. You've been served. I pushed a pen toward her. If I were you, I'd sign now so we can end this sham of a marriage, I said coldly. I won't sign, she hissed, her voice venomous. I'll fight this every step of the way. I looked at her evenly. That might be challenging, I replied, seeing as the FBI is freezing your accounts. She paled. FBI? Her voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes searching mine in disbelief. I gave a slight nod, keeping my tone steady. Yes, allow me to introduce Special Agent Jones and Agent Smith. These agents are here to take you into custody, I continued, handing her a pen. They have a warrant, so please sign the documents. In 2 months, this process will be behind you, and you can focus on your defense. Her face paled as the reality of the situation settled in. Shaking, she accepted the pen and signed the divorce papers. James, standing by as a notary, verified her signature, added his seal, and gathered the papers. I'll see that these get to Miss Hawkins, he assured me. Sophia's parents, silent in the background until now, stepped forward. Her mother spoke first, her voice thick with disappointment. Sophia, I can't believe what you've done, she said, her words laced with shame. Sophia's eyes narrowed as she turned to her mother. I'm only doing what you taught me, she retorted coldly. You always said to take whatever I could. Her father and I exchanged stunned looks, both directing them toward her mother. Denise, clearly shaken, murmured something under her breath, but her words trailed off. Her father turned to her, his expression tense. We'll discuss this later, Denise, he said sternly, then looked at me, his face softened with regret. David, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Let us know if you need anything. We'll handle her things. She can retrieve them when she's ready. I nodded, clasping his hand firmly. Thank you, Ralph, I replied. As they exited, Special Agent Jones stepped forward, his tone formal. "Sophia Miller," he announced. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and trafficking." Sophia's face contorted in shock, yet she complied, slowly turning as instructed. Jones secured her hands in cuffs, reading her rights as Agent Smith observed. She cast me a glare filled with both hatred and desperation as they led her out. Once the agents had gone, James glanced at me, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "That went as smoothly as planned," he commented. "Yes, it did," I murmured, shaking his extended hand. "Take care of yourself, David." "I will, James." As he departed, I felt a long, burdened weight begin to ease from my shoulders. 6 months later, the divorce finalized without any complications, thanks in large part to Robin's expertise and the weight of the charges against Sophia. The legal proceedings favored me entirely. Federal authorities arrested multiple associates involved in Forge's criminal network, including Forge himself. Investigations continued, and trials commenced in the months that followed. Sophia, deemed a flight risk, was denied bail and remained in custody throughout. Though she had ample funds for her defense, the lengthy trial drained most of her savings, and by the end, she had spent over 3/4 of her money on legal fees. Our final encounter took place shortly after the divorce was finalized. I visited her at the county jail, where she was shackled, seated across the table from me with her wrists and ankles restrained. She looked worn, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. "You look terrible, Sophia," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Yeah, well, orange isn't really my color," she shot back, her defiance unbroken. "What do you want?" I studied her, silently disgusted by the arrogance she still wore like a shield. "Have you received the finalized divorce papers yet?" I asked. She responded with a flat, detached tone. "Yes, I got them today." Testing the waters, I added, "I happened to watch some of your videos." A smirk tugged at her lips. "Did you enjoy them?" she asked smugly. "No," I replied coldly. "Actually, I found them revolting." She shrugged, as if unaffected. "Doesn't matter to me," she replied. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Just out of curiosity," I said. "I noticed all the videos start the same way. Some pitiful guy stripped down, tied to a chair with a cage on. You know. Was that your idea?" Her eyes lit up with satisfaction as she replied, "Yes, that was my idea." I narrowed my gaze. "Was that supposed to be a stand-in for me? Is that what you wanted to do to me?" "Absolutely," she said without hesitation. "I've fantasized about it for a long time. It's something I enjoyed imagining." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're twisted. Did you actually think I'd just sit there and let you do that to me?" She raised an eyebrow, almost challenging. "I don't know. Maybe." I kept my voice steady. "It's a good thing you didn't try. I've never raised a hand to a woman in my life. But if you had tried that, it might have been a different story." Her smug confidence wavered briefly, and a hint of fear flickered in her eyes. I didn't give her time to respond. "I've heard stories about what you and Forge did to those other women. How do you live with yourself?" She rolled her eyes, letting out a mocking scoff. "What do you expect me to say? Should I cry? Beg for forgiveness?" I shook my head. "No, that wouldn't be like you. Maybe someone with a conscience would. But we both know that's not you." For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a trace of sadness in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was far from finished. "Honestly, it's for the best you never had kids," I said, my tone ice cold. "You were a terrible wife, and you'd be an even worse mother." I saw her flinch, her composure cracking under the weight of my words, but I pushed on. "Why don't you do the world a favor and just end it?" Her eyes widened, truly shocked. I knew my words had cut deep, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel some of the pain she'd caused me. "We already have enough problems in this world. We don't need you wasting air." I stood, ready to leave. Behind me, her voice came out in a shaky whisper. "Oh my God, I turned you into a monster, didn't I? You really hate me." I turned back to look at her one last time. Did you just now figure that out? Yes, Sophia, I hate you. I hate you with every fiber of my being. Because of you, I don't think I'll ever be able to trust or love another woman again. I hope it was worth it. Without waiting for a reply, I walked out. As I left, I thought I heard her sobbing, but I didn't turn back. I was done caring. Not long after our final confrontation, Sophia provided testimony against Forge and his associates. She handed federal authorities everything they needed. In return for her cooperation, she accepted a plea to reduced charges, resulting in a 5-year prison sentence. James told me that she'd spend most of her time in a secluded facility, kept safe and far away. Meanwhile, Forge was handed a 105-year prison sentence, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of him spending the rest of his days as an inmate's punching bag. His entire team received similarly harsh penalties. Sophia's parents, Ralph and Denise, went through a rough separation after an argument at my place. Denise claimed she had never been unfaithful, but Ralph struggled to believe her given all that had happened. Eventually, they reconciled and sought out marriage counseling, though a lingering tension remained between them. As for myself, I moved on. I sold the house, bought an apartment close to work, and started taking care of myself again. I joined a gym, got fit, and even dated a bit, but none of the connections felt real. After Sophia's betrayal, it was hard to open myself to trust again. Therapy with Dr. Branson became a steady part of my life, helping me sort through the emotional wreckage. Yet I knew there was still a long road ahead. The experience of learning that someone you deeply loved and trusted has been deceiving you is hard to fathom until it happens to you. But things were gradually improving. I had my job, my new place, and a renewed sense of freedom. Some women at work even began to notice the changes in me. While there were still aspects of myself I wanted to work on, I remained hopeful. Tomorrow was always a fresh start. Sitting here now, reflecting on the intense journey I've endured, I see clearly what's been lost and what's been gained. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. I entered my marriage to Sophia with faith in our vows, believing in our honesty and the strength of our connection. Now, sitting in my new apartment, far removed from our past life, I understand that trust is as delicate as glass. It can shatter in a heartbeat, leaving jagged pieces that wound deeply. When I look back at the man I was before all of this, I barely recognize him. He was idealistic, hopeful, maybe too trusting. That version of me is gone. What's left is someone stronger, more guarded, and far less willing to be hurt again. Yes, Sophia's actions hardened me. Her lies, her betrayals, they cost me dearly. But in exchange, I gained clarity. Clarity about who I am, what I deserve, and what I will no longer tolerate. Moving forward isn't easy. It's one of the hardest things I've ever faced. But over time, I've realized that healing isn't about erasing or even forgiving. It's about facing the reality of what happened and allowing myself the grace to rebuild. I've accepted that Sophia never truly loved me, not in the way I once loved her, and that's okay. I can live with that truth now. Looking ahead, I'm uncertain if I'll ever love as deeply as I once did, or if I'll fully trust someone again. But this much I know. From now on, I'll live for myself. I'll find joy in my own company, embrace new experiences, and maybe, just maybe, open my heart again someday. But for now, it's about reclaiming my life, my peace, and my sense of self. The future is still unknown, but I'm no longer fearful. I faced the worst betrayal imaginable, and I survived it. If I can survive that, I can survive anything. Tomorrow brings the promise of new beginnings, beginnings grounded in truth, self-respect, and a future free from the shadows of the past. This is my story, not only of heartbreak, but of resilience and renewal. I've closed the chapter on Sophia, and now I'm ready to write the next one, a chapter where I am the author of my own happiness. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.